I can see everybody, so I think we're good to go. We'll start with the land acknowledgement.
Okay. So anybody that's able to stand, if they would like to, we acknowledge we reside on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, as well as the importance of establishing and maintaining cultural safety through learning from Indigenous peoples and perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jean-Paul was not able to make it tonight. He's out of...
I'm not hearing anything. Is
somebody speaking?
Hold on.
Okay.
Now you should.
Okay.
Can you hear now?
Can you hear now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Oh, no. We're okay. We're okay. Thank you. As I was saying, Jean-Paul is out of town, could not make it this evening. So I would like to welcome Richard.
Thank you.
helping at the chair table today. And for the agenda, we've had David Lepofsky is also out of town, calling in from the US, and so has asked for a adjustment of the agenda because he's time limited, and he's asked that we could move the K-12 report to right after our two presentations. So we have the initial agenda, the transportation presentation, budget presentation, and then David's asked to be able to go in there, and he will only be using about 10 minutes of his time, he said. If there's any objection to this, please let me know. If not, could I get a mover for the agenda, please? I have Melissa. Do I need a seconder for this committee? Leanne, do we need a seconder?
Sorry.
Do we need a seconder?
Usually do, yeah.
Okay, could I get a seconder for the agenda?
I will second it, seeing
Thank
no
you.
others.
Thank you, Richard.
Need your microphone, Richard.
Oh. Thank you. Any opposed to approval of the adjusted agenda? Hearing none. We need to declare any possible conflicts of interest. Does anybody have a pecuniary interest to declare? Hearing none, we need to approve the minutes from the CIAC from November 2023. Could I get a mover and a seconder for the minutes?
Melissa first, moving.
And a seconder? Anyone online?
And we should see
I can second that.
Thank you, Leo. And do we have any questions or comments about the minutes? Seeing none. Anyone opposed to approving the minutes? Hearing none. The next item the next piece in item 1 is the action log updates. This is updated online. Do we have anything from staff to add, or should be highlighted with the action log?
Nothing highlighted.
Nothing that comes to mind? Okay. If you have any questions, you can forward them to staff. Oh, just a reminder that the chat is not monitored, so if you have questions, please put your hand up online.
through the reaction.
Yeah, use the reaction tab if you can, and if we miss you, please feel free to give a shout out. We're trying to keep track of everybody while we're in the room, but it's hard to monitor any text or chat. And our next item on the agenda, item number 2, is a presentation from our transportation group, and we have our guest here, Gary Green, who's our senior manager, and go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much for having us at the SEAC meeting. It's always a pleasure to be here, and I know that there are always very many questions, and so we do look forward to that, and we'll try to speed along the presentation part so that there's more time for questions as well. It's nice to see some familiar faces, and I'm joined by my colleague, Kevin Hodgkinson, who will be assisting and answering a lot of the questions as well, because operationally he has the expertise, and also he has a lot of the vision and experience within the transportation portfolio. I also noticed that Craig Snyder is here this evening as well, and that's who I report to with respect to transportation. So welcome everyone. I will just quickly go through the presentation slides, and if Kevin or Craig wish to add anything, please feel free to jump in. Just start by giving a brief overview of our structure for transportation. Some of you, this will be old news, but for others, you may not have heard this before. The TDSB is part of a consortium with our colleagues in the Toronto Catholic Board. And so we jointly operate our transportation, and this is done for a number of reasons. It's for greater efficiency, being able to share routes, being able to maximize the number of drivers on the road. And so Kevin is the general manager of the consortium that oversees for TDSB and TCDSB. Every student with special needs is supported with an individual student transportation plan that outlines the specific requirements needed to transport the student. And schools will forward new applications to, I'm going to say TSTG, or the Transportation Group, just so you know what I'm referring to when I mention that. That's Kevin's group. And applications for students with special needs are prioritized first for processing. And you may also remember at the beginning of each year, the first week is dedicated so that we're only transporting students with special needs, as well as other programs that are priority programs as well. The transportation system is optimized each summer, given the changing needs of students, and students are grouped based on geography, program hours, and physical or other needs. We have a slide in there that gives you a bit of an understanding of some of the scope and scale of the number of students who are transported between TCDSB and TDSB, and you can see where some of the biggest numbers are and some of the distances. I'll just call your attention to the distance slide, where you can see how many are transported who are beyond 10 kilometers. And that's a real challenge, obviously, with any busing, especially when the weather gets very tough. And often this is because of the congregate school settings. So somebody could be traveling, for example, from South Etobicoke to central Toronto. And so we're setting that up so that it's a very long journey, unfortunately. But we try in those cases to take the most direct path. And so often you'll have one student on transportation when it's that distance. So you can see for TDSB, the 10 to 15 kilometers, that's 629 students. And
Gary?
15 kilometers or beyond
Sorry.
is 174.
Sorry, Gary, we're just having some trouble. We've been having technical difficulties tonight, as you know. So we're just having some trouble getting the slides posted up. So I'll just get you to pause for a second.
So it's in the
Of course.
meeting mail, so everybody has it, and then the meeting.
Okay, so the presentation is in the meeting mail out. What's the title on it?
Transporting students with special needs.
Perfect.
It was Leanne's email on Thursday, December 7 at 9:07 p.m.
It's in Leanne's email Thursday, December 7 at 9:07 p.m.
Gary, do you want to share on your screen?
No,
To do it?
Perhaps, Kevin, do you have that up? I don't actually have mine up. I have my slides printed out. Sorry.
I do. I can share here possibly.
Appreciate that. Yeah, it just prevented me from toggling back and forth.
Okay, I'm disabled at this point in time from sharing screen.
Okay, Wendy's trying to share it.
Or if you could at least identify the page number of 12, which one it is.
this one.
Okay.
Oh,
There we go.
Which one? Action plan?
And so I believe we're on page 5 now
Wendy?
with the 3 charts on it.
Okay. There we go. Wendy has it up.
Okay, and if we can go on to the next slide now. Yeah, that one there. I'm sorry for the size of the slides. I know they're very difficult to see, but of course, if you have questions after you've had an opportunity to review it as well, feel free to send me a message, and I'd be happy to answer those questions on a one-on-one basis as well. So what I'm drawing your attention to is the number of students that are beyond 10 kilometers, and it's 9.9% of the total students that are transported. And I mean, obviously that can be quite concerning. One measure that we put in the recent policy change to address that was that when a student is being placed and it's going to be more than 10 kilometers, then a discussion is to take place between the people doing the placement within the special needs department and our transportation staff. So we can discuss what impacts that might have in terms of the distance that is being traveled, and to make sure that the unique needs of each student is being considered, especially if there are any medical issues that could be exacerbated by being in a bus for a long time. We're particularly concerned when the weather turns bad and not having students stuck in a bus for a long time. The next slide talks about the cost to transport, and it gives a breakdown in terms of the total cost. So approximately half of TDSB's total budget for transporting students is for students with special needs between the gifted program, wheelchair accessible vehicles, and other similar programming. Next slide, and I know this was of particular concern with respect to questions, was around timelines. So every March, April, in around that time, TSTG will send out to every school confirmation that the student is returning to the program or if they're leaving. And then schools are requested to send any changes or edits or new applications to us by the end of May. Now, often, you know, when it's a new student to the school, they won't necessarily know that at that point in time. That could come in August or September. But the more information we have at that time, it's extremely helpful so that we can do the best possible routing. So all applications are received by the end of June and processed over the summer while the planning team addresses student and busing needs. Unfortunately, as mentioned, a lot of the application changes or additions end up coming to us in September. So that's where you'll see some backlogs in September if we're getting an influx of a lot of new applications. We've been trying to work very hard over the last couple of years to work with schools to try to get as many verification forms in on time, and that's been getting a lot better, but it's still an area where we can continue to improve. And during startup, families can expect an application that is fully vetted to take upwards of 10 business days. As we get later in the year, that timeline reduces to 72-hour turnaround to get students on the bus. Again, that's if all of the information is there. We want to make sure that we have as much information as possible so we can meet the unique needs of every student. Kevin had provided on the next slide some examples of different types of busing, whether it's coupling or where there's one bus for one road. And so the difference is basically where there's a large concentrated and dense population, you can use a bus for multiple runs. Where the population is small and dispersed, usually that it's just one bus, one road solution that's used. And this is where a bus will start at the most remote location and pick up students from various schools along the way that are clustered together. The third solution is a hybrid where they do a combination of both. The next slide, so after the mapping, is steps for improvement as we're going forward. And I know the pace of change doesn't go as quickly as we hope for. And so each year we try incrementally to make some improvements. So in 2018, we had met, I think around 2018, 2019, and it explained that we had a new software. And this has worked fairly well for the big buses. what we're finding is that it's not a catch-all solution that solves all the problems we were hoping for it to solve when it comes to transporting students with special needs. And so we continue to look at more efficient software for that. There is some in the market, but it's really hit or miss. And so we keep working on that, and that is our plan for the next couple of years to try to address that. We've continued to push for parents to access the transportation portal, and we've continued to work with our software vendor to try to improve that. And we're looking into phone apps to improve communication, since 70% of individuals accessing transportation information are using their phones to access that info. In 2024, tablets will be on all buses so that drivers can sign into the route, which then ensures the GPS and routes are more accurately matched. And this will allow drivers to access the route roster and directions to improve reliability of service. So we do think that that is going to be very positive. And we're also looking at a pilot project around RFID, which is a way to be able to track student usage, and also just to track that a student actually got onto a bus at a particular time. And we do feel that this is a very important technology to use. It's widely used in some areas, but this is something that we think would enhance safety and also reliability by knowing how many users are actually on the bus at a given time. So that concludes the formal part of the presentation. Kevin, is there anything that you would like to add, or anything that I missed along the way?
Thanks, Gary. The only thing I would mention, we talked about the training slide for our drivers, and I know we have worked with both the special ed departments, both the Catholic and public schools, to create some training materials for our bus companies, because, as you know, dealing with these students, these drivers need to understand the students with special needs. So they've worked diligently with us to help us create some of this material for our drivers to help them better understand the students, which hopefully then in turn is a better solution for our students as well.
We're open to questions. I'm not sure who's monitoring the questions, but we're open to any questions you may have now. And as I've mentioned, Kevin has a lot of the expertise, so I'll probably be deferring to him on a lot of this. Thank you.
Thank you. So on the list here, we have Richard, Nora, David, and Isabella. So, go ahead, Richard.
And each person will be on a 3-minute timer. Thank you. So my first question, you mentioned at the start of the school year, it's 10 business days, and then it shifts to 72 hours as your turnaround time once school starts. I'm assuming that means 3 days, keeping it in the same units of measure, 10 days at the start of the year, 3 days max as the school year progresses. Would that be correct?
Correct. So 3 business days. So certainly if it falls on Thursday, Friday, Monday would be the implementation day. Correct.
Okay. And my second question was, I understand you were looking at different software and different pilots and RFID tags and everything else. And you said in a couple of years. I'm thinking, and just to pick one of those ride services out there, Uber, for example, I got to think when they start looking at software and stuff that they're trying to implement, 2 years down the road is a long time, I would think, the way things change today. What options is there to speed this up? And is it a matter of cost accessing some of these services? You mentioned some of the busing programs are hit and miss, so maybe you could speak to that a little more, and what we could do as SEAC to kind of help drive either faster software testing, acceptance, integration, etc. Please. Thank you.
Through the chair, I'll start, and I'm sure Kevin will have a lot more to add. The RFID, we are starting the piloting in the coming year, so that's good news there. For the other software, it's a combination of ensuring through our governance process that we have the necessary funds, also making sure that we roll this out with a pilot, because we don't want to go down the wrong path with respect to a software. The one that we have now has been functionally working. We just don't feel as though there's enough opportunities to have greater efficiency. And so we're pretty certain there's better options in the marketplace. And so there's some research that has to happen. There'll be a pilot that has to happen. They'll need to make sure that we have the funding allocated. But obviously, advocacy along the way is always very important. And so we definitely appreciate that support. Kevin, did you want to add more to the pilot?
Just in terms of technology in general, and as I said, it is changing quite quickly. And we actually are postponing some things for a year out simply because we can't do everything all at once. I know we've postponed another phone app that will replace our Where's My Bus functionality from our website to the phone. But just we don't simply have the staff internal to be able to do it all at once. So sometimes that's some of our limitations in terms of trying to get the stuff turned over and making sure that it's working properly before we roll it out. Last thing we want to do is roll something out that doesn't meet our stakeholders' needs.
Thank you.
And I'll just add a couple of quick comments too. I mean, one of the things that we want to look at through the trial process is privacy concerns, obviously, the usability of the software, will the tag stay with the child in the way that it's on one knapsack and they don't use that knapsack? We don't have the same tracking. So the test pilot will give us some of the opportunity to understand and vet some of these different operational issues as well. So we'll keep you apprised as we move forward on it, but there is a lot to consider as we work through this process.
Thank you. Next, we have Nora.
Thanks. Thank you so much for the presentation. And I guess my question is related to training a bit. So I appreciate, Kevin, that you asked, because I was going to ask a lot of questions about training staff for the students. One of the things I'm concerned about is students who have safety plans and safety needs, and how I understand it's a balance of privacy, and however the drivers probably need to know how to support that student so they don't become escalated. So I'm curious about what that training looks like. And I'm also curious about for students where a travel assistant or somebody who's going to ride with them and support them on the ride, how that's all managed and who fundamentally pays for the travel assistant. And I believe it's Central Board Office. I just want to make sure. I think Nandy explained that to me before. But I'm curious about the students who are, I almost call them orchids, where we're talking about a delicate environment and we're trying to keep them supported. How do you make sure that the drivers know how to manage that? And when they change, how do you ensure the new driver knows that?
Through the chair, that's an excellent question. We certainly, I think with all environments, you have some great drivers. You have some drivers that not so the best in terms of being able to deal with students. Certainly, as the if students have to change vehicles, certainly the profiles move with those companies. So again, part of that 72 hours is to allow the bus companies to get that information to the drivers so they understand who they're transporting. Certainly from our end, we expect them to do not necessarily a trial run, but at least to know where the student is, contact the parent, find out from the parent what those issues may be with their child, what works to help de-escalate things with their child if things happen on the bus. So that point of contact with the parent is important. Certainly, I know sometimes our carriers are, drop the ball on that and don't get a hold of the parents in a timely manner to make sure that happens. But certainly the intent is that information gets to the drivers so that they are aware of who they are transporting. And most importantly, I think, is really when they talk to the parents, those strategies to help transport those children. Sometimes music helps them. Sometimes they have tactile engagement that helps them. Sometimes sitting by themselves, sometimes earphones. Whatever those are, it's important that information gets to the driver. And again, to the whole privacy piece of that. So certainly our drivers do need to be aware of those safety plans. So we do have drivers that actually have to exit the bus to allow the students to be boarded, secured, and then re-enter the bus in terms of that. That's all part of that safety plan for that student and theoretically really for that driver as well. So that information is communicated through to the drivers through the company dispatch that we as we make those changes for those students. Sorry, the second question was around
travel assistants. I'm concerned because I also know some boards have trouble even finding them, and then you actually have students not coming to school. So I guess my highlight is, as we talk about all the ways kids are excluded, which is an ongoing theme, which you're kind of stepping into for me, this can sometimes be one of the reasons why a kid's not coming to school. Travel assistants, not allowed on a bus, all those things. And it's not marked as an exclusion, but it's a reason a kid's not coming.
Yeah, so we certainly transport quite a few nurses, educational assistants, what have you, but you're correct, they all are secured by the school board. whichever department it is that actually is securing them for those students. And I'm assuming it not only, since the school bus is an extension of the classroom, so I guess as they're working in the classroom, it's considered an extension to that. So we certainly transport them generally back to the student's home, and then from there they make their way to their own home in terms of that. But we do have some cases where we will transport the EA to another location as well. Sometimes those nurses are supporting several students on the bus, so we have to make sure that those same sets of students are on those vehicles going to and from the same location. So those are all part and parcel of how we have to create those routes for those students. But as I said, they are paid for through the school board, and if we get the request to service them, we service them with those students basically.
And do we know if there's a backlog of filling for that? Just my last question. Do we know that we have enough travel assistance for the students who need them?
I couldn't tell you myself off the top of my head in terms of who else. I think personally, I'd like to see some more educational assistants and nurses on those vehicles. Certainly, we have to sometimes make some extensive routing changes to deal with some sort of students, and sometimes an EA or a nurse would probably help us mitigate some of those issues to help those students travel safely to and from school. So right. I would certainly say that we're probably looking forward to more of them, but I can't say for certain of the numbers that we require.
Does the special ed staff know?
Nancy, do you know?
Yeah, sorry, we don't have a backlog, Nora, of this, and I've communicated with you about travel.
You pay for it, right? You pay
so
for it.
We pay for it. We don't have a backlog, and we address them as they come in. Thank you.
Thanks.
Perfect. David?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. In my 3 minutes, first, has anyone referred to you folks for your review the recommendations that the school board and the government received 2 years ago next month from the Kindergarten to Grade 12 Standards Development Committee as they relate to transportation services? There were detailed recommendations for reforms. I'm wondering if you've seen them.
Yes, we need to review them and provide our input. I know that I believe that's been sent to the transportation team, and
okay. So I guess my question is: they came out almost 2 years ago. Have you actually seen them up to now?
I believe we've recently received them, and we've committed to reviewing them.
All right, we've got a working group focusing on that report, and we'd be quite happy to work with you on strategies for implementing them. The other thing that I'd like to do is you referred in your report and out loud to the fact that there are each student has an individualized transportation plan. Is a copy of that plan routinely given to parents and families?
Not necessarily. Generally, it's the families that are filling out the individual transportation plan and submitting it to the schools, and then schools will work with the families to complete that document and forward it to us so that we have all the information we need in order to deliver that service.
Okay, because here's the thing. There's always been an application form to fill out. Here's what we need. But it's not a plan of what the board will do. It's a family saying, here's what we need. The Section 75 of the regulations under the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act requires there to be a plan which assigns responsibilities to school board, transportation providers, parents, and so on. That's not what the form does. That's an application form is just an application form. And I mean, I can tell you, I've never seen a plan. And this requirement's been the law for a decade. Can you folks look into actually providing families with a copy of an individualized transportation plan as the AODA requires by law?
So, Gary, I'll just intercede here, please. So, David, thank you for those comments, and we've recorded them. We will take them back and work not only with the transportation department, but the larger TDSB AODA committee that we have. Thanks.
Okay, that would be great, because it's not just a matter of fill out a form. The regs require more. And our working group would be happy to work with you on it. Thank you. Back to you, folks.
Thank you. Next we have Isabella and then Aileen, and then we need to move on to our budget presentation. Isabella, go ahead.
Thank you. This has been very informative, and just have two very quick questions. The first one is on the training. And on that list, I see that there's individual training on anaphylaxis, how to deal with EpiPen and first aid. But one thing I don't see is dealing with seizures. So quite a few students, especially at congregated sites, have various seizures disorder. And quite often they're wearing a harness, and when they go into a seizure, they, they have to be at least looking to make sure that they don't choke. Anaphylaxis, as well as epilepsy, have been flagged by the government by the Ministry of Education in Ontario as those medical conditions that should be supported and have additional learning material. Are any of the bus drivers actually getting training on how to deal with people who have seizure disorders? That's just my first question.
Through the chair, seizures specifically, I don't believe there's anything in our training manuals that we asked the companies in regards to that. Certainly, again, bus drivers, the expectation is that their first, obviously first aid, get their first bit, then to call 911. Really, it is in their best effort to get the people that have the ability to deal with this to get to the bus as soon as possible. But certainly, if seizures are an item that we think we need to add, we can certainly look at adding that to something as a first response, as bus drivers having to at least understand what a seizure involves.
Well, I mean, depending how they're sitting, it could be a potential life-threatening situations, and that's why I'm asking, since so many of the students with especially severe developmental disabilities have that, but also others. Can we actually look at on page 2, overview student transportation? I'm looking at the number of hours. So the longest travel time, I assume it's to and from school, is 5 hours, almost 6 hours.
Isabella, 30 seconds left on the clock.
Yeah, sorry, that wouldn't be a certain individual. That would be the entire time for the route. That route may pick up a student, drop them off, and then go pick up other students and drop them off. So it's the combination of the entire route. So we certainly wouldn't have a student on the bus for 5 hours and 43 minutes, but that's how long that route, that's how long that driver is taking.
Okay, so
and the average, the maximum time for one way for travel would be 75 minutes for most routes. We endeavor with our students with special needs to cap that at 60 minutes where possible, understanding that when the distance is from the lake shore to the far reaches of the city to a congregated site, that's something that we have to look at because the traffic sometimes makes that more than 60 minutes.
Okay. No, that's better, because I saw the 5 hours. I just thought, my goodness, I hope no student is stuck on a bus for that long. Okay,
you,
that's great. Thank you very much.
Aileen? Go ahead, Aileen.
Yes, hi. Thank you very much, Gary, and thank you, Kevin, for the wonderful presentation. Just two quick questions and a thought, actually. On the air tag, I believe there were situations in the past that was tied into as part of the IEP, and I think the IEP actually tied into the individual transportation plan that you mentioned. So I'm wondering, would that be suffice to meet what David mentioned about Section 75 that pertains to AOTA? So I think that's been done in the past. So I'm wondering if that's still been a tie-in to the individual's IEP regarding the air tag, especially for a runner, and the runner very intuitive to be able to change air tags, and then the caregiver or the parent possibility to communicate with the driver on like a daily basis, like during the pickup. The air tag is now in A. That means the for instance the coat, and then if there's the shoes, or 3 other spots. So there's a communication that could happen A, B, and C for today to ensure that the student is being tracked properly. So that's my first question. And the second question is, I understand that sometimes the drop off during the day before school, and then the drop off the end of the day could be different. Would that be honor as well? Because for the special students with special needs, a lot of times that after school could be a time for therapy, for after school programming, with that flexibility being still honored. So I'm just checking in on those questions. Thank you.
So I'll answer the second question first in regards to the programming hours. And basically, we service to what the schools tell us those students need. So if that student needs to be out early, get an additional programming center, they let us know what those program times are. We'll facilitate that to make sure that happens. So absolutely, we're here to service those students and their needs to that regard. In regards to the first question, sorry, it's regarding to
the air tags and putting them in multiple places just to ensure that they're not, one is not taken off, or they don't forget the jacket, or that's for when there's an accommodation need.
So we don't actually use
also,
air tags ourselves per se.
Sorry,
parental.
Eileen, did I miss that, or?
Yes, this is correct. And also whether there's a tie into the IEP, because with the tie into the IEP, that will be a communication with the school or the teaching team, the assistant, the SNA, the EA.
Yeah, so I certainly know through the IPRC process and whatnot, there's certain expectations and part of that safety plan and I know particularly for runners. So we have certain expectations for drivers, I know for runners. So make sure he's on the inside seat, not on the outside seat, or he's at the back and not at the front, or whatever that comes up with that for that plan for that student is in place for them. As I said, for air tags, that's probably more a parental item. I don't think we have ever offered air tags. Not necessarily a bad idea, and something maybe we want to consider in terms of that, because we have had several sets of runners who have escaped the bus, and we have had to get them back onto those vehicles. So that will take that under advisement to look into that. So thank you.
I'll just add a piece there around on the actual transportation form. It says medical and additional information. There's a section that speaks to AODA safety plan to be completed. There's also special transportation requirements that's completed there to some of those pieces that Kevin just spoke to, as well as, for example, I'm just giving an example, whether a child is verbal, nonverbal, that's also communicated. And then there's an additional component on the form that says for any other information that's relevant to the child's transportation. So we do have the AODA safety plan component, we have special transportation requirements, and then we also have any additional information.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. If you have additional questions, you can please send them through us, and we'll get them to the transportation staff. So if you have anything after today, please let us know and we can follow up. And next item on the agenda is budget update, and we have Mr. Snyder with us this evening. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen so I can click on my PowerPoint. Oh, it's host disabled. Can I just get permission to? Thank you. Try again. Oh.
It's on?
There you go. Yep, just bring it up now. So good evening, everybody. I'm just getting my screens organized, so just give me 30 seconds. So there was a couple things asked for tonight for me to present. So on the agenda I'm going to go through tonight with you is the GSN consultation update, a link that I provided in the agenda, and I think it's in my PowerPoint as well, to some funding information for those members of SEAC that are new or need additional information around funding. And then I'm going to talk about the 22-23 financial results for special education. There was a question asked around deferred revenue, so I'll have a slide on that. And then next steps, the next major steps in the coming months for the budget process. And I'm happy to take any questions. So I sent along in the agenda a copy of the GSN consultation that was submitted to the Ministry of Education based on CX comments and those of the Special Education Department working with us to merge the document. And I will point out to you at the area, as you know, when we talked to you earlier, they had two only questions this year, the Ministry of Education. The first was around the GSN and what reforms they can do to make it more easy. And the second was around opportunities to better communicate with, that was communicate with taxpayers. The other section was around special education, special interest portion, and the C. And so, excuse me, working with staff, we completed those answers and we took some of the feedback that SEAC provided as well. And then what we did at the end of that section around the ministry's questions and adapting some of your valuable comments around it, we also present other special ed considerations at the end. So that's where we encompass some of the additional thoughts that you had provided to us. So you do have that copy there, and it will be posted on our budget website with all our other documents as we build our budget so that all stakeholders can see it. Oh, I know what I should have done. Sorry, to make this bigger, I should start from the beginning and then click. So the next thing I was asked for was to talk about educational funding. So the link on the screen, and it was sent separately as well, I think, in the agenda, is a link to the 23-24 education funding, a guide to special education grant. And it provides information around all the different components of funding and has a very good user guide to it. So that's there. And I was going to give the technical paper, but I thought this one seemed to be more user-friendly, so I provided that context to you. If you do want a copy of the technical paper, which gives you all the funding as well, just not special ed, but there is a section related to special ed, I can give that to Leanne and she can add it to the minutes for you if you'd like to have that. So now I'd like to take a few slides and go through the 22-23 financial results as it relates to special education. So the first area I want to talk through is the GSN revenues. So these are all in millions of dollars. So and all the slides will be in millions of dollars where there's any amount. So you can see the 8 different fundings that come through the grant for student needs. So there's this special education per pupil amount at roughly $192 million. There's a special education equipment amount, just about $11.5 million. The differentiated special education needs amount at 119, almost just shy of 120 million. The special interest portion, again, I have to thank my colleagues in the special ed department for having the deadline extended for claims and getting additional claims in so that we maximize our funding before they close that window and start going to a more proration process. So we got just shy of $14 million for their hard work. And again, very appreciative. And then our education community partnership programs was just over $15 million. Behavioral expertise for professionals, 1.6. Behavioral expertise for training, 700,000. After school skills development was 300,000. That was formerly a PPF that was moved into the GSN. So for a total of about 355 million of special ed funding. Other revenues, I kind of did it this way this year to see if this works better for the committee, is the Student Support Fund, which is the collective agreement provisions that were carried over, is 11.2 million. Mental health funding from various grants, there were several, was about $3.5 million. COVID learning recovery, the last time we're going to probably see this, was 5.5 million, and that's really to help support students through the recovery post-pandemic. Benefit trust because we have trust benefits that are trust funds now for our different collective partners that do it, it's a flow through from the ministry to us to the benefit providers for our staff. So the benefit trust that relates to the staff that were in special education is 8.3 million, because the cost for those staff are there, so the funding offsets the cost for their benefits. And then other revenues is 200,000. This is where we have some itinerant supports that we charge the Toronto Catholic School Board. They use one of our staff. So that was, 28.6 million. So the expenditures, and I broke it down by the different major categories, and I broke it down elementary and secondary. So I'm not going to go recite elementary and secondary, but I just go through them. So for teachers, we're spending just shy of $240 million. For supply teachers, it's 27.1. For teachers' assistants, that's the SNAs, and that's about 125 or just shy of $126 million. And textbook supplies and computers is about 11.8 million. Our paraprofessionals, that's our psychologists, social workers, that we are attributable to the time they spend with the special education students, is just over $80 million. And then our principals, vice principal, department head cost is around 5.1 million. Our school office staff account for 3.1 million, and our consultants and coordinators are 8.4 million, for a total expenditure in special education of just over $500 million. So the next slide is looking at the envelope. So what I did here was try to make it as straightforward as possible. So you have the 355 from the GSN, and you have the 28.6 in other revenues, for a total funding of and revenue of $383 million. The expenditures that I said a moment ago is just over $500 million. The self-contained classes get attributed a portion of the People Foundation grant for the teachers that would support those students in the self-contained classes. So what we do is we take that out as a less of expenditures to get to a net expenditures. So for our population of students that were self-contained, the proportion of the People Foundation grant that supports that is 61.5 million. So our net expenditures for funding purposes for envelope calculation by the ministry standard is 439 million, or a difference or a deficit in funding of $55.5 million for the last year. So the other question I was asked to come with was, what were the deferred revenues at the end of this year? So in C, equipment per pupil, there was a deferral of $6.3 million, as it is sweatered, has to be spent on equipment for students. Behavioral expertise amount was 1.5. The training, ABA training, was 1.2, and the after-school skill development is $100,000. So the last thing I wanted to share with you tonight was talking about the budget process. So these are some of the key times and what we're anticipating to do with our Finance Budget Enrollment Committee, and I'll talk a little bit more about this for you as well. So January 18th is our next regular FBEC meeting, and we're planning to present the revised estimates. Staff are working on this now. We got an extension to the end of December 22nd, to submit it to the ministry. And basically what the revised estimates are a recasting of school board's budget. All school boards are required to do it. And what it takes is looks at your enrollment changes, and then looks at your any significant cost changes you have as a result of either enrollment or, in our case, a lot of time inflation nowadays for school boards. So we're working through that information right now, and we'll be presenting that to the FBEC committee in January 18th. The other thing we're hoping to present to them is what I call a consolidated Reader's Digest version of the financial results from last year. And typically, it's going to just be the two main areas we want FBEC to focus on is what was our financial bottom line at the end of the year, and then what's left in our reserve balances, so that helps inform their decision-making as they move forward. January 29th is our special FBEC, and there are a few things happening here, but these are the main ones that revolve around the budget. The first thing is planning department will present the 3-year forecast of enrollment that we have to have submitted or will be submitting shortly to the Ministry of Education. We'll present the FBAC committee to show them what the 3-year enrollment trends look like. We also will present the first quarter results. November 30th is the end of our first quarter. So it'll be very similar to our revised estimates in all intent and purposes, but we do present each quarter the reports to the board. And then the most important, of course, and the one that'll draw most attention, is we will be presenting the 24-25 financial forecast. And what we're going to do here, as I think I said to you our last time we met together, is we're going to take this year's funding model and we're going to put next year's enrollments in it, and then we're going to work with our departments, come up to their budgets, and try to project where we're going to be next year. We will, if we know of any changes to the funding models that the ministry's either announced, we'll include those as well, but primarily we'll be using this year's funding model, updating for enrollments, and then we're going to ask our departments to submit their budgets for next year based on their best information. And that's what will come forward to the Finance Budget Enrollment Committee January 29. Shortly thereafter, on February 14th, at our regular FBEC for February, we'll be presenting the options to balance the budget, assuming that we still have a deficit situation. And as you are aware, this is the 3rd year of our deficit recovery plan. So this is the year that we committed to the Ministry of Education that we'll be back into a balanced budget situation. So depending on what the forecast coming out of the 29th says, staff will be working through the month of January, the early part of February, to come up with options to present to the trustees for their consideration. The next major events in budget, there'll be some consultation planning to go on with our stakeholders through webinars between in February and early part of March. But the major events for the FBAC committee is March 4th is our school-based staffing report going to committee. And this is where we talk about our teachers, our SNAs, our EAs, our ECEs, our principals, school office, caretakers, special ed supports, all the school-based staffing basically, which is about 65 to 66% of our budget. So that'll go to board March 4th. And that's so that the ES department can work over the March break and start to meet with principals at the end of March and allocate them so they can start staffing their schools through all the collective agreements and staffing timelines they need to follow. The other major event is at the end of March, March 26th, we're bringing an operating budget to the board for approval. And I believe March 29th or 30th is their special board to approve the operating budget. And again, as we talked to you and the trustees have endorsed, this is primarily to ensure that if we balance our budget, we're doing it before the GSN comes out, and then it's very clear what is caused by the ministry versus what we do ourselves. And we're trying to do that in advance of the announcement of the GSNs. So that's kind of the schedule for this part. There will be obviously subsequent meetings around the budget when the GSN itself is released, likely in April. We'll have to do an analysis of what the impact and bring that to the trustees with any modifications that may or may not be needed to the budget. And then the other significant event in budgeting will be the capital budget, which will be in the May. We'll present it in June. They'll approve it. The capital budget we don't see as a huge issue because it really is not controversial, and it's pretty well set as the capital priorities funding announcement came out already. We're hoping to hear back on our submissions in the next few months, we hope. But the capital budget is pretty straightforward, and it'll happen in the May and June final approval of that budget. So through you, Mr. Chair, that's the end of my presentation for tonight. Happy to take any questions from the committee and provide any additional feedback that I can.
Thank you, Craig. We have questions from Richard and Nora.
Thank you. So,
Okay.
quick question for Craig Snyder. You mentioned options to balance the budget, assuming a deficit. And when you showed initially that there is a $55 million deficit currently calculated, I'm thinking you're either going to find the money, run a deficit, make cuts, or otherwise find creative solutions. So my question in two parts, very simply is, where can SEAC provide input, and what input do you require to support what you're trying to do? Because I hear there's different things. You can balance the budget, as say you can find the money, you can make cuts. Where are these changes going to come, and how can we help?
So thank you for the question. So I'll start. The 55 million I showed was the funding shortfall for special education. It's not the board's deficit, because as we've talked about many times, and for our new members of CF, I'm happy to kind of go through this again. We've incorporated the special education deficit in our operating budget for a long time. It changes year to year how much it is, but when we build the budget, the deficit's already been in there. We've done adjustments over time. So our deficit for the board's deficit will be a different number. I don't know what that number is yet because we're still working through the calculation of it. But we did end this fiscal year that I just presented, 22-23, and I apologize for pausing, but my feet are in 3 years right now, so it's all a little confusing for me which year I'm talking about. But for 22-23, the board ended with a $48 million deficit. Now, there's some unique things happened there, and it's on our website under the audit committee. You can see it was December 7th or 5th. I can't remember which day we did a presentation to audit. But what we're doing now is we're recasting the budget. So we're working with all our departments, asking them to look at their budgets. We give them a lot of information about their previous years and their current year. And so when we collect all the information from the departments, we'll know what the board's deficit is. It's not that we're looking to say we need 55 million out of special education, or our deficit for the board's 55 million. So having said that, we will know we'll present to the trustees on January 29th, the board's projected financial position for 24-25. When we present it, I'm happy, again, to come back to SEAC, depending on your meeting schedule is, and present some information around it. And then there'll be opportunities for SEAC to provide feedback either through webinars, or we'll be doing some online surveys. And then, of course, you guys, as always, as you and PIAC and the other advisory committees are all invited to send some deputations to the EPAC committee on your thoughts. So I guess right now, at this point, really what I'm hoping is that you've got information that tells you where we were last year. You have the information on the funding guide that tells you a little bit about how special ed's funded by the province. And then as we build our budget, you'll be able to see where we're at as an organization. And then you can provide your advice as far as how it impacts students with special needs and where you think the priorities are that the board should consider as they deliberate their budget for the next fiscal year.
Thank you.
Hope that helps, Richard.
Thank you. Next, we have Nora.
Hi, thanks again, Craig, for the presentation. I guess my question is about for staff. So when that information goes forward and that budget goes forward, last year we had a motion that stated that some sort of description about the current level of service of special education in the system would be given to trustees as they saw the budget. Do we need to be making another motion to make sure it's clear that there are problems? So for example, we have still not rectified. We've had 2 sort of presentations and conversations at SEAC meetings about kids not admitted to school and school exclusions. It's alarming to think that we'd be facing more cuts when we know we have kids not coming to school already. So how are we resolving that problem and getting accurate depiction about who's not coming to school and letting trustees know that we're not actually, as a board, fulfilling our duty to accommodate all students in publicly funded education? So what information are trustees going to see about kids not coming to school, about kids' EQAO scores, all those indicators we had last year? What will they read aside from like dollars and widgets? Like we have this many special education kids last year, we have this many this year. What else will they read?
I'll defer to Nandy and Louise, but I'll start. Typically, when we build the budget, it is, as you said, Nora, it's a financial document that shows our revenue sources and our expenditure sources. And then as we build it, we do as far as from my area, we talk about the risks. We talk, obviously the biggest, well, two of the biggest ones are enrollment can fluctuate, and we have to be adaptive to that. And the second is inflation, especially the environment we right now are. Inflationary costs are just killing us. And then the third one that I would provide as a risk from a financial perspective is absenteeism, because we're seeing a lot of absenteeism in our staff. And then as we build the options to balance, those is where we will do a little bit more narrative around it. If we're saying we want to do something with energy savings, or we're going to do something in transportation, or we're going to do something in a staffing model, we'll present enough information that trustees understand what the option that we're putting in front of them is. But I'll turn to Nandy or Louise if they want to comment around program delivery information.
Before the comment, I'm wondering if I could just ask Nora to maybe reiterate a question, and just, are we basically saying the budget is built around estimates of student enrollment, et cetera, but the actual reality of it is that many students may be excluded and are not actually appearing in the classroom, so the numbers that we've used to build the budget don't necessarily align with the actual day-to-day attendance? Are you trying to integrate the two? How does it become a budget question, I guess?
Well, I guess if they're going to make decisions, about how to spend the budget, right, then you have to make a case about where they're coming up with money and what they're going to give on, right? And so my concern is that people think, because numerically our numbers are down, that it just makes sense that the money would go down because there's no needs. Like, obviously, if you have fewer kids, you'd need less money to meet that. That's not necessarily true, given the needs of the students you're necessarily serving. And so I think all of us have had all fall conversations about kids who are not coming to school currently because people don't have enough staff. And in some cases, they're straight up told at the door, we can't accommodate you. Despite that being illegal, it's being said. And tragically, because families face reprisal, it's hard to get them to come forward. So it's our role as a committee to sort of be their voice to staff and be their voice to trustees. So what are trustees going to know about the situation in special education? We have already established some of our money is paying for services for kids who aren't even special education. So if we're paying for all the social workers, unless all the students that are being served by social work are identified as having special education needs, we're spending money for special education on students who are not special education. So I'm just conscious of the fact that dollars are going to be cut, kids are not coming in the door, and I don't see how it gets better.
Thanks for the question or the comments, Nora. So special education and inclusion is in constant communication with the budget department about funding for students with special education needs. In terms of how the Board of Trustees would know what SEAC's feeling, we do, our vice chair for SEAC's a trustee, as well as we have 2 trustee representatives that do attend SEAC meetings, one of whom is online right now. And I do believe that the trustees on SEAC would be taking that back as well to FBEC as an example. But certainly if SEAC wanted to advocate to the Board of Trustees as they did last year, that's an option as well. So I think there are multiple ways that trustees will receive the concerns shared by you on behalf of SEAC tonight. And we'll continue to do that. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks very much, Nandy. And if I can contribute to the conversation, good evening, Nora, and thank you for the question through you, Chair. When we create a budget for students with special education needs, of course, we look at all of the needs of our students, and that is considering investment in tiered intervention such as Empower, staffing support for students who benefit from SNAs, additional social worker psychologists, investment in additional teachers for congregated classes if they're required, and so on. You'll remember from our last conversation, the board is on a deficit recovery plan that is mandated by the ministry. At this point in time, our finance team meet with the ministry monthly to review the board's progress in trying to eliminate its deficit and getting to balance. This will be a journey over at least 2 years. We were tasked last year with reducing the special education budget by $5 million and are expected by the ministry to reduce the expenditures in special education by another $5 million this year. It was very good news that the special education team, through incredible hard work, had a very dramatic increase in SIP funding. So where the ministry is expecting us to come in for reducing expenditures is still a question for us. Like we did last year, when the staff who are charged with creating a plan makes that transparent to SEAC, obviously makes that transparent to the Board of Trustees, and we illustrate through charts and a report to show you exactly where those reductions are being suggested. Another data point that I would just remind our SEAC members that we are having reduced numbers in students who are reported as receiving the supports and services from the special education staffing team. That's an important data point for us to be considering. That does not necessarily mean that we don't have mainstream students who are not yet identified as receiving supports and services who still benefit from the services that we provide. Just a couple of points for clarification. One, I would just want to assure SEAC that not all of our PSSP, our social workers and psychologists are attributed to the special education funding line. We recognize that not all students access services who have special education needs, and that would be erroneous for us to make that allocation to our funding line. And secondly, our students who are on modified days, we must remember that that is an accommodation that is grounded in our responsibilities, and that there are students who absolutely require a modified day in order to be receiving success at school. They may be, as an example, receiving IB therapy and so on. Acknowledging still, absolutely, there are students who we know are on modified day as a temporary means until that student's profile is thoroughly considered and appropriate program is in place to bring that student to full day. We're hoping from last month that you were reassured on the very, very careful monthly tracking that the special education team, through the leadership of Andy Palmer, is expecting through our superintendents to our principals. We are on that data monthly and asking our principals to identify the supports and timeline and their outreach to parents to talk about those students and the progress they're making to achieving full day attendance. It is a shared goal. Not all students are going to be able to attend full day because their needs are such that they need to be on a modified day. Their funding on being absent through part of the day does not affect our funding level. So another point of reassurance, they are counted as a full-time equivalent student. Thank you. I hope that.
Sorry, and they're coded differently, correct? So their absences are not attributed to their parents.
Let me take that back, Nora. I don't want to be answering erroneously. Okay. I think that they would be marked absent, but let me verify that for you, okay?
Yeah, I'm just saying if the school's decided that they think that's what's best, I don't think it's fair if a parent sort of has it written down like they didn't send them. They've been told not to.
It would be, it would be our expectation. They would be coded appropriately.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Melissa, and then we need to move on in our agenda.
I can be brief. I just wanted to thank Craig very much for this presentation. It was very specific, but very general, big picture, high level, and good to understand. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Happy to come back anytime you want me.
Thank you, Craig.
Chair.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Trustee Patel, a small comment. If I get a floor.
Yeah, go ahead, Trustee Patel.
I'm listening to the conversation, and I think it was Nora or a staff member commented about trustees on this committee. Well, just to let everybody know, I'm a chair of the FBAC, and I'm very much interested in hearing from the parents and their inputs. You have my email address. It's zakir.patel@tdsb.on.ca. Please send me your suggestions, and we are here to listen to you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda is the update from David on the K-12, the work of the K-12 Standards Committee. And there's going to be a request for feedback and some other resources. So I'm just going to highlight that before David starts. So it's that feedback piece is what we're looking for today.
And how much time is this piece? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, how much? Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Go ahead,
Okay, great. So, hi, everybody, and thank you for accommodating me on the schedule. So, let me I'm going to talk for 1 minute, and then I want to go around the table and get input from everybody. This committee recommended about 6 years ago that the school board needs to do a lot more to educate, to give parents information they can use in a format and in a language they can understand about what's available for their kids, what supports, what programs, and where to go to advocate for them or ask for them. Because a lot of parents don't know and find it all very confusing. And up till now, we've been told largely either talk to the principal, who's usually busy, or read the special education plan, which is huge, complex, detailed, and not designed for that purpose for parents. So we the K-12 Standards Development Committee, of which I was a member, recommended that needs to be a lot more done by school boards in this area. And this committee voted that that should be a priority in the board's implementation of it. That means SEAC did about a year and a half ago. So the K-12 Standards Development Committee Working Group, we sat down with school board staff, and Wendy's on this call and has been fantastic to work with. And we said, we really need a new communication plan by the board to figure out what needs to be communicated and how best to get it to people. And so Wendy came back at one of our meetings, and I've been updating you in writing on this, with a first cut at a action plan to get started. In other words, not worrying about planning everything over the next 5 years before they do anything. Let's talk about first steps. We gave some feedback. She revised it. It's now before you, and we want to give you a chance to give your input on it. Now, I'm not saying it's everything we asked to be included, and I'm not saying, but I am saying it is the product of a deliberation that's included about 5 or 6 of us giving input, and now we'd like you to get input. It's in the materials that were sent out to you on Friday. And to make it easier for you, I'll just tell you a couple of our comments were that the materials that are provided to parents assume you're already identified as a parent of a kid with special ed needs. And there may be parents who don't know if their kid is and would like to know what they should be knowing about this. The materials on the website are very hard to find and assume a lot of knowledge of technical jargon and terminology that is kind of insider baseball. A lot of parents won't know. So we've said that needs to be fixed, and user-friendly materials provided that it kind of assumes that they don't have any of that knowledge. And just as an illustration, the entire page dealing with home landing page on special education, I can't remember if it uses the word disability at all, and if it does, it's like way the heck buried. So over to you. A number of us have given input. We're eager for anything you have to say, and then back with the staff will take it back. They're already working on this, but we will also be having follow-up meetings with staff, and we can try to build on what you provide. So back to Richard, I guess, to just go around and let's get people giving us what you like, what you don't like, what you'd like added.
I'm just looking for the speakers list to see if anybody's put up their hand at this point. I don't see any hands up, David. I'm actually going to throw my hand up at this point. And then Melissa? All right, because mine it kind of is all encompassing. You talk of K to 12, David, and I find that this is somewhat exclusionary, I would say, for many of the students in special education, because I think we should be talking K to 21, talking about special education, it's up to the age of 21. I don't know that every student in special education that reaches the age of 20 or 21 is still in school is considered to be in grade 12, and maybe staff can talk to that, because I'd like to see somehow, how do we capture that part of the group that really isn't pigeonholed by the grade levels?
Richard, that is a phenomenal point that we didn't catch. And we can easily do that by just asking Wendy if you can add to the report that this will be communication strategy relative to all students involved in the board at any age. Because K to 12 has been the short form that they use, but you're right, there are some students who stay beyond what is technically called grade 12 all the way up to age 21. But we could just clarify that that needs to be included. It's a very good point. Back to you.
David, it's Nandy Palmer. Yes, we will make that change in the document. Thanks.
Thank you. Over to Melissa for her question.
I just wanted to say thank you to David and the K to 12 group for your work on this. And I just wanted to echo that the feedback on trying to make information easier to find on the website, some more direct links so people don't have to do multiple clicks to find things, has been provided a number of times also through the Effective Practices Working Group and through the Special Education Plan feedback that we've gotten from a number of people. So I won't detail it here, but when somebody's getting into the weeds on that, they might want to reference the feedback that's been provided through these other channels, or basically it's probably reaching all the same conclusions anyway. But I know it's very daunting and big, but it would be very welcome. So thank you.
All right, we've been trying for 6 years to get this raised, and we began our discussion with Wendy when she came forward with a plan, heaping mountains of praise and thanks, because we're at the point where we're having the substantive discussion that we want to have and hoping to move it forward even more.
Thank you. Over to Aileen.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, David, through you, Mr. Chair. That this is a wonderful continuum of what we've started for quite some time. I'm so sorry, I've got some folks that are not feeling very well here. Just a quick question. Building on the K-12, including those turning 21, I'm wondering if there's a transition plan out into the community or out into post-secondary education. And if there's a thought for this happening, I'm just wondering, how's the partnership going, or do we have any partnerships? I know it's very difficult to track every level of partnerships. So I'm wondering if we could pilot certain partners that already have, for instance, certain universities that already have a great transition working relationship with us, or colleges, or actually day programs that could really help us to solidify and transition well and to see this through to journey with the students. So that's number one. And number two, I'm so sorry about the sneezing. I'm so sorry. Number two, this is just a thought, and I've used it recently with one of the families that reach out through the school community because they are newcomers to Canada. And I don't know whether there are any restrictions of ChatGPT, but I've actually asked them to try to use this voice feature of AI, and then they've actually tried to use it, and they were able to research some of the information that was required. So I'm happy if we can take this offline and to be able to show it to you and demonstrate to you how this was done. So they were able to extract the information they require from the website. So it's very interesting to see. So I just want to leave this thought through you, Chair, and through you, David, to see if we can take this further.
Okay. I'm going to speak quickly because I want to get others engaged. The K-12 report to the province had tons on the whole issue of transitions. And so that would be captured with the whole area of transitions between levels of school and beyond school would be captured by the kind of things that this communication strategy needs to cover. But we can also make sure it says that explicitly.
Thank you. Isabella.
Thank you.
Thank you for this presentation. Just wanted to very quickly mention something with regards to the website for special ed. I've served on a communications subgroup committee with others, and the issue of website has come up. One of the things that I did do as a SEAC member is look at other school boards and see where the special education is situated on their website. And like I expected, it was near the top of the website where you can find also other tabs, elementary school, secondary. It wasn't buried the way it is on the TDSB website. The special education has so much information that cannot be just kind of packed the way it is right now on just one page. It needs a special page of its own because right now it's sharing. And to be honest with you, when you go and you look at the page, it's simply overwhelming the amount of text that hits you. It has to be also accessible. We've got parents who also have various special needs themselves, and the way it is right now, it's just simply not working. And lastly, special education students should be treated equally, just like others, so they should have an equally strong presence on the top of the TDSB website and not be buried into some subgroup or at the bottom of the page. I hope that moving forward, that this can eventually change. To be quite honest, it's embarrassing to, be representing special education and not even being able to send parents to the TDSB website where they can actually easily find information that will help them and their children. So that's the only thing I wanted to say, and I hope that this will be taken seriously. Thanks.
Would that be a question to staff to kind of look at where it's positioned now and come back with some suggestions how this could be improved?
This is something we've been talking about on K-12, and we'll take that back. That's certainly on the menu or on the agenda. Absolutely. Thank you. That was great as well.
Leadership report.
Okay, I don't see any more hands, so we'll move on.
All right. Thank you all very much. The K-12 group will take it back. And if you have thoughts after this, just flip me an email. I'll share it with the working group because just consider us a working group that's a work in progress. And we're going to be plowing ahead with this. All right, I'm going to be signing off. Thank you all very much. I want to wish everybody a fantastic holiday and a safe holiday and see you in the next year.
Thank you, David. And the working group actually does have a meeting next week on the 19th,
yes,
I believe.
Yes,
so.
We do.
Thanks. I just want to add there that we created 4 parent guides, 4 of them last year. And before the working group met, we actually have been working with the communications department to do some even shorter, more user-friendly videos to go with each of those parent guides. So there are components in the parent guides that we had to include using ministry language. And then each of those parent guides already in process with the communications department and the web team is being created in more parent-friendly language. So that was work that was already started prior to this year and prior to the K-12 committee making those recommendations. So I just want to be clear that we are in total agreement that we need to be using less wordiness, if you will, and simpler language, and we had already started to do that work last year. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Take care, everyone. I'm signing off.
Thank you. So next we have the leadership report.
Thank you. So good evening, everyone. I will start, and we have several exciting pieces that we'd like to share with you tonight. And again, I won't be reading through entirely, but I'll just be covering briefly each topic. So we've created the first of a number of fact sheets on special education and inclusion in the TDSB, and they're called just that, fact sheets. And the goal is to create 4 of these over the course of the year to share with families just data and information related to students, programs, services in the TDSB for students with special education needs. So the first fact sheet is around, it's just an introduction to special education in the TDSB and gives data about how many students, for example, in the TDSB are identified as students with special education needs. The goal is to have a second fact sheet in January, as well as one in March, with our final fact sheet coming out in May that will speak to trajectories of students with special education needs. And this work is being done in collaboration with the research department. It has been posted on the public website as well under special education and inclusion in the TDSB in accessible formats. On November 24th and 25th, we attended, TDSB staff attended as well as presented at the annual Ontario Council of Exceptional Children Conference, and listed in the leadership report and in the PowerPoint are a number of sessions that TDSB special education and inclusion and professional support services staff presented. This year, we are partnering with the Leading and Learning Department to present sessions for newly appointed vice principals and principals, and they're specifically targeted to this audience, although we do offer professional learning for all administrators throughout the year, including monthly administrator drop-in sessions where administrators engage in micro-PD sessions, no more than 10 slides, and then an opportunity for Q&A every single month for administrators. As per the PAC on SEAC calendar, I'm on TDSB suspension, thank you. We have included suspension data over time, and that was one of the PAC on SEAC recommendations, and we have put that there, and the information is there. And we've also included for you the TDSB Caring and Safe Schools report that was attached to the leadership report that just goes into more details about suspensions and expulsions in the TDSB. So what I'll highlight here is that while students with special education needs, excluding gifted, made up approximately 15% of the student population in 2021-22, in that same year, students with special education needs, excluding gifted, represented over half of all suspensions and expulsions. So we're working with the Caring and Safe department to look at mitigating factors when we have students being looked at for suspension in the TDSB. As per the PAC on SEAC calendar as well, we have provided, sorry, I apologize, let me go back to the item before. And we're using 2021-2022 data there because that's the last and latest data that we have from the Caring and Safe Schools Department. From the PAC on SEAC calendar as well was providing SEAC with a breakdown of TDSB students with exceptionalities, and we've gone back 5 years, so from 18-19 to 22-23. Please note that we're not double counting students, so the students that, the numbers that you see there reflect the students' primary exceptionality. So, for example, we can have students, blind low vision for this year, it says 37, but in actuality, we have double that amount of students with blind low vision needs. However, it's not their primary exceptionality. So they might have, for example, physical disability as their primary, and then they have blind low vision as their secondary. And we use this report, the same reporting here as we would provide to the ministry on primary exceptionality, and again, for non-double counting. We have posted on our TDSB special education website the first of 3 virtual parent information sessions that we held, very well attended by families, 100 parents. And this year we did things a little differently. Last year we offered 2 evening sessions, and this year we offered an evening session as well as a session during the day. We weren't sure how well the daytime session would be attended, but it was evenly distributed. So parents appreciated that, and I think we would move forward with that for the upcoming 2 sessions, one in the winter and one in towards the summer. And we've listed here for you some assistive technology and C-team professional learning communities that we're focusing on. And again, as has been brought up by SEAC many times, we're focusing on UDL, Universal Design for Learning, and we really are supporting the belief of using strategies that are good for all students, but necessary for some students, i.e. students with special education needs. We also have, as we do every month, IPRC data for November, as well as psych assessment data and aged data, which we will be providing to SEAC 3 times per year. And so this is our first month providing the age data. And that concludes the leadership report, and we're happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
And before turning to questions through you, Chair Carter, or sorry, may I just add to the leadership report?
Through Chair Arts, absolutely.
Sorry, Chair Arts.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. I am wanting to just take the floor, Chair Arts, and speak to SEAC. We have received concerns by staff and members of the public regarding comments made in our November SEAC meeting. So I was hoping to use this forum to address the concerns that were raised. So the individuals raised concerns to express disappointment and request an apology regarding comparisons that were made to addressing harm resulting from anti-Black racism and anti-ableism. You may remember the discussion. The importance of understanding intersectionality of identities, the importance of seeing all human rights equally, the urgent need to work together as allies and not to engage in microaggressions against all who seek equity were raised. Those issues were raised as critical concepts. We are asked to act in unity for and with each other. I thank those individuals who communicated to us for raising these concerns to all of us. And we all make mistakes as we engage in this work, but it is the unlearning that we engage in and the new learning that will help us represent students with disabilities and intersecting identities. Speaking about our mistakes openly serves us to become stronger, wiser, and intentional in the important work that we do. To support our learning, members of the equity team are preparing learning for all of us on intersectionalities of students with special education needs in the new year. I know they will be warmly welcomed by this committee. And thank you for the opportunity to raise this with our team and to raise the themes that were heard and a step forward for all of us to take together. And personally, from myself to all members of SEAC, I wish all of us a peaceful winter break that is filled with time with family and friends and activities that bring us joy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so I have on questions, I have Diane and then Melissa and then Nora and Leo and Richard. Go ahead, Diane.
Hi there. Hi there. Yeah, thank you for that information. I did get a chance to. I know there's a lot of work being done on the in the spec ed department, and I appreciate the parent consultations and all the different things that you're doing. One of the things that I looked at on the website, so I actually went through. I think there's 3 videos plus the recent one. So it was a lot of information, a lot of hours of my time going through these videos. But the good news is there is some really good information in there. But nobody, for myself, I'm not somebody who has little kids at home. So I really believe that if we could do something with that information, I think it's a theme that we talked about a little bit tonight, and just find a way to make it easier for people to go through that. And one idea, and I don't know if this is possible from the technology, I think we brought this up through our K-12, but could we just even, I know we can't, I'm not saying video clip it or shorten it or anything like that, because that may take a lot of work, but is there a way to do some kind of like a table of contents or something like that through each of the videos so that parents could actually just go through the different parts of it? And I also noticed that some of the videos had some duplication, right? So I may have seen many videos and many of the information many times, right? So again, it's great information that's done. I think it's good for even CAC members to look at it. And the other thing that I really thought was really helpful, and my question to staff is, are the teachers seeing this information? Because some of the processes that you describe in those videos is the things that you're telling us as a group at CAC and the things you're telling the parents. But are the staff actually looking at this information and getting the same information so that we're consistent? Because it's great information. And I just think we should be sharing it amongst everybody the same, so that we're getting the same messages. And the other thing that was interesting is, which would be helpful for us as members and the staff and everybody really, is at the end of the sessions, they had questions from the parents. So now we're hearing the parents' voice and we're hearing you answer those questions. So we're actually hearing what it is. And there was wonderful responses, right? That I think satisfied parents. So anyway, that's just my comment. Lots of great information. Just wondering if we could find a way to, just make it easier, because it's just getting lost. There was some great stuff about universal design for learning. I don't know if the staff are getting that information. It's just, so that's it. So my question to the staff is our staff seeing any of this stuff, or do they know about this? That's my really ultimate question. That's really important for today.
Thanks for the comments and the questions, Diane. So I want to be clear, the videos that I mentioned earlier are not these videos. These videos are recordings of the parent engagement sessions that we held. So that's why they're longer. The videos that I referred to are videos that will accompany the 4 parent guides that we created, which will be, with graphics and short and snappy and to the point. But we'll take this back and see what we can do for the actual videos of the sessions that we did, and see if there's a way to bookmark, if you will, certain sections. Right. But the reason that we have put those up is because some families were not able to attend the sessions, so we thought we would make them accessible for any family that would like to go back, and play on their own time the session, so nobody will have missed out. With regards to staff, of course, we have a monthly staff newsletter that we put out to staff, and we communicate with staff about everything we're doing for parents, but also our professional learning sessions are very much focused on UDL and all those pieces. So yes, staff are aware, and staff also get their own professional learning on all of the pieces that you see there. With regards to the duplication, yes, because we just finished our first session for this year, you should have 4 videos, video recordings, and so we'll take down last year's. I'm not sure if we will take them down or not, because even though some of the pieces are common, Diane, we tweaked and added things based on parent feedback. So I'd rather parents have the information than duplicated than, miss out on some.
Yeah, totally, I get it. And that's why I agree with you. I think you should keep it, because there is lots of information in each of the parts. And I was not referring to the shorter videos. I know that's something separate. And I think these ones here, the consultations, are valuable. Like the stuff in there is very good, but nobody has 4 hours to go through and find that information that I found. And that's why I think that referencing would be amazing. And so teachers or whoever doesn't have time, they can just go through it. So if you could take that away, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next we have Melissa.
Okay, thank you. So I have a thank you and a question. So the first thank you is a huge shout out and thank you very much to staff for the more detailed information on the assessments, the aged waiting lists for the referrals and everything like that. It was a longer attachment, very informative, very reassuring to receive it, and also huge commendation to all of the staff. And I think perhaps in particular to Shameen Sandhu, who's head of the psych department, for showing that there's a reduction in the wait list for really all of the categories, month by month and also year over year. So it's probably great to track it, and it's reassuring for us to know it, and keep up the good work. Thank you. Okay, so my next thing is a question based on the chart we received about TDSB students with exceptionalities. So again, thank you very much for providing that information, very informative and helpful. I ask this question every time we get this information. I'm going to ask it again and hope that we can do something about it. So I understand that the listings here only show the primary exceptionality, so that leads to questions on how do you choose a primary exceptionality? And secondly, could we find some way, I'm assuming internally staff knows, for example, you said, a child might be BLV, but also physical, so they're listed as physical instead of BLV. Is there some way that we could share, even if it's on a separate chart, when students have multiple exceptionalities, what those are and what the incidence is? So I think it would be helpful, big picture, for people to understand, wow, this percentage of our special education students have 2 exceptionalities or 3 exceptionalities, and here's how they're distributed. So, just off the top of my head, for example, we might find that there's a higher incidence of learning disabilities than shows on this chart because that may accompany some of the other exceptionalities. So not trying to create a make work project, but are seeking sort of bigger picture information and also specifics, and if there's some way that could be tracked. And just one other note, I think that you're not required to provide that for the ministry, but I think for internal management, you probably have it, and we'd love to have some look at it. So thank you.
I'll take that back to the research department and see what they can come up with. But it took them a very long time to get this data. We don't come up or determine a primary exceptionality. That happens at an IPRC for every individual student. But I'll take that back. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Just to update, we are gonna, because we started 20 minutes late, we are gonna go to 9:20 before we ask for more time. Next we have Nora.
Thanks again. And maybe my comments touch on what Louise was referencing. Reading through the suspension data that was presented in Caring Safe Schools, and it sort of talked about how they were going to address the section about the disproportionate suspension of students with special education needs, which was like pretty dramatic. In it, it sort of references looking back to intersecting identities and bias. But nowhere does it go back to the whole thing about the standards K-12 committee is talking about, which is about disability. And so I think my theme for the night is nobody wants to say the word disability, unless it appears that we don't use disability as language in special education. And it's like many people see that as their primary identity. and would say they are deaf or say they are blind. It's the first thing in their mind. And yet, even when we looked at the first fact sheet, there's no reference to a disability. It starts with being identified as a special education student and a full identification, where there'd be tons of kids that have disabilities being served with special education. So I guess my question is, I'm trying to understand, as a mother of a child who was probably called an idiot at school so many times by peers and literally staff, with no redress, because that's just common language. and it's a pejorative. And it was never addressed from an equity lens or seeking any kind of, that's some sort of a prejudicial term. I'm sort of looking at what is being done about teaching about identity and disability, and why are we so hesitant to talk about it? Because I feel like it's leading to things like that suspension rate, not understanding that people's communication is different, not understanding what those terms mean, what a disability means, what they are, is leading to the kids being excluded yet again through suspension and informal processes. So I guess I'm trying to understand why we don't talk about it and why it's not part of the learning. And I think I'm getting to the point where it's feeling very emotional for me. So I'm going to put that on the table.
Thanks for the comments. So to clarify, Nora, you're preferring us to use students with disabilities as opposed to students with special education needs. And secondly, we are focusing on anti-ableism quite strongly with not only the department staff, but again, with all staff. So we are referring to it as students with special education needs and anti-ableism as part of the work we're doing, bigger umbrella of anti-oppression.
And I appreciate that, Nandi, and by no means do I think you guys aren't working hard. I just find it discouraging when I see another department like Caring and Safe Schools not even reference it. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of an indication about, is it leaving the department? Is it reaching other departments? Is it normalized in language? It's not about your efforts. It's all about outside the department seeing it as legitimate work. And those are the things I have concerns about. It's not about the efforts you guys are putting into it. So when I see another department see that and not use like anti-ableism, that I find that very disturbing. And I think you're going to be stuck using both special education and disability language, because some kids in special education don't actually have disabilities.
Yes.
They may be, there's a lot of other reasons, but then there are kids with disabilities and we're not talking about them either. So it's just a reminder about that theme David brought up, I guess, is more what I'm talking about, because it seems to be a problem. Thanks.
Thank you. We will definitely take that back to the Caring and Safe team and hoping that their report this year will reflect that. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Next we have Leo.
Thanks, everyone. Well, in the meeting mail out, leadership, they provided a very comprehensive psychoeducational assessment document, and I also thank you for that. It was very, very interesting to read through. It has substantial data regarding assessments. I have already previously emailed staff, but I want to publicly bring it to the attention of the rest of CIEC as well, and looking forward to staff's answer either today or in January. There's one chart which really got my attention. It shows substantial differences in the proportion of assessments across learning centers. And my question is regarding that graph that you might have seen. Why is there such a difference in proportion of comprehensive DK versus gifted across the 4 learning centers? When you look at Learning Center 2, for example, it has 33% gifted, while Learning Center 3 has 5%. If it's because of demographic reasons, that would point to the fact there might be some inherent bias in the process. When giftedness, as assessed under the current system, is a trait that follows natural human variation and is not simply a socially determined variation, we should expect the distribution should be similar across geographic regions and not so lopsided as it is now, which suggests a very strong social demographic influence. I'm sure there must be more than one social demographic reasons, all with their own negative biases, but anecdotally, there's a huge social push for gifted in some areas of the city, North York in particular, where gifted is seen by some families as enrichment. I'm told that there's a thriving business sector that prepares kids to pass gifted testing, some costing upwards of $700. You can see for yourself, just Google gifted prep course, right? So apart from these many unspoken issues with these biases, my main concern here is if this industry is actually creating a fire hose of gifted assessment demand in certain learning centers that would end up diverting resources from comprehensive and DK assessments in those regions. Because aside from those regions with a huge influx of gifted assessments, I think we all have to be very clear that gifted assessments should never get in the way of comprehensive and DK assessments in any learning center. Comprehensive and DK must have priority over gifted, which is not a disability. This is a matter of human rights. I truly hope this is the case in all learning centers, and I really look forward to staff feedback. Thanks.
Thanks so much for your comments, Leo. I'm going to defer this item to January's meeting, where we can have the senior manager that's oversees the psych department come, and together we can answer the questions, but we really appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dandy. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. And next on the list, we have Richard.
Thank you, Michelle. So I'm looking at the two slides, the TDSB suspension data over time and the TDSB students with exceptionalities. And looking at the orange boxes on the suspension data, obviously that's identifying those students with special education needs, excluding gifted. And then the next slide breaks down all the various exceptionalities. Without necessarily illustrating the granularity within the suspension data over time, I'm wondering, do we have data that would support certain levels of training of staff where certain exceptionalities might be more common to having being suspended, et cetera, that staff in those areas could kind of be prioritized to get training? Not sure if that works out. And then to Melissa's comment, I think it was Melissa that said about, or Nora mentioning about disabilities, no reference to disability. I know confidentiality is a big thing here. And obviously, if somebody asks staff, what does that student have? I don't know that the staff could say that student has a developmental disability. So in maintaining that confidentiality, we've got everything broken out here by program, and I understand that. If we start putting the word disability in the documents, then we're slowly beginning to start disclosing this as well. I think special education needs may be kind of a nice catch-all, but I think it's something to look at. How do we address what Nora is saying, yet still maintain the confidentiality that we're not necessarily identifying what a student's exceptionality is? I'm sure it's a very difficult topic to address, but something I think we have to be very cognizant of, because we're asking for one thing, but we're also very cognizant of not disclosing certain things. Thank you.
I think I would add the data from Caring and Safe on students with special education needs being suspended. I can't remember off the top of my head. I did ask this, if that's students with IEPs or students with exceptionalities, because those are definitely different numbers. And I know from a discipline hearing perspective that as soon as it's an exceptionality piece, at least from the Board of Trustees, that this is a quashed suspension, or those mitigating factors around exceptionalities are at the top of the list. Are you looking at the mitigating factors? And there's, I do know that the difference between when I started as a trustee and seeing cases come with mitigating factors to now and seeing them not come, that those conversations are happening. But I believe that the caring, I would ask for clarification also with Richard's information about what that means for Caring and Safe as a special education designation for those students.
Thank you. And I think it goes full circle back to what Nora was saying too, though. One of the reasons that we use students with special education needs is that we know that a student doesn't have to have an identification in order to receive special education programs and services. And so when we talk about students with special education needs, we're talking about students with a formal exceptionality as well as students with IEPs only. I will go back and confirm with Caring and Safe, but I do believe that when these are done, it's IEP student. And so that's why we do tend to use students with special education needs, because it encompasses all students receiving special education programs and services in the TDSB, which again, they don't have to be formally identified or have had an IPRC to receive that. We provide the services to the students as they require them. Thanks.
We're over, okay. Okay, one more question, and then we need to move on to, in the agenda. Oh, sorry. Sorry, we'll get the first questions out of the way. Sorry, who's that? Oh, Sarah.
Hi, yes, thanks. I'll try to be brief. Just with respect to some of the points that have been raised vis-a-vis intersecting identities and to Leo's point about gifted, I'm curious if staff can bring back to the January meeting data with regard to the metric IPRCs have been using vis-a-vis determination of giftedness for those students who have learning disabilities, those students who are LD and gifted, because that is a subcategory, as we know, along with English language learners. And so I am curious if there is data available with regard to how many IPRCs have been held that use that specific metric, and if that data is not available, how we can get that information. I think it also sort of lends itself to bigger questions with regard to information that we prepare for parents and caregivers with regard to expectations as they're laid out in board spec ed plans versus where parents and caregivers should go if the expectations are not met in terms of the criteria that is being promoted by the board in terms of how those determinations are made. You know, I'll leave it at the last point, you know, for students who are students with learning disabilities who are being assessed for gifted. For example, the final line on page 139 of the 2023 plan says only the IPRC based on documentation and consultation can determine when the learning disability criteria, for example, for gifted identification will be used. I flag that because it's an equity issue that speaks to the point that Louise was making vis-a-vis intersectionality and to the points that Nora's been raising. Everybody's been bringing up in different ways throughout the meeting. It's very important that we understand the equity implications of leaving an ad hoc decision-making body to choose how and when students with disabilities, learning disabilities in particular, are assessed with a particular metric. By what rationale will the committee choose to use that determination? And if they don't, what expectations should parents and caregivers have in terms of receiving rationale for why or why not? I'll go back to the first point, which is if we can get data with regard to when and how often those metrics are used in terms of those intersections, I think it would be really useful. That's a concern that I personally have and that has been raised by constituents in, if I can call them that, in Learning Center 1 certainly, and you know, off the record in Learning Center 4 for me as well. So it'd be really helpful for me to kind of know myself and also to be able to take back to community members who've been asking.
Thanks, Sarah. If you can just send your email, send an email, and if it's not January, that we'll get back whatever data we can have. We'll bring it to a future meeting, and then please follow the parent concern protocol. So it's the school principal and the superintendent, as well as the executive superintendent. If you're not able to get the information from the superintendent, and certainly it's a psychology team as well as special education team that will share the information as to why or why not
For sure.
the student didn't get the identification or the exception.
Absolutely, I'll do that, Nandy. I will say though that this has happened to me, and I'm a rep. I'm a SEAC rep, and I've followed the steps. And if that's happened to me, and I have a facility with policy and with being able to communicate with different tiers. Structures within a TDSB, then I can't imagine what it's like for my peers who are, differentiated by language and other access concerns. So I'll absolutely email. I don't want to dump this in the meeting, but I did want to raise it publicly with the rest of the committee as well. I don't think I'm an outlier, is what I'll say. So happy to email, and I'll do that for sure. Thank you.
Thanks, I appreciate it. I'll just state that, the psychologists will be able to say why or why not, and they do have to follow the criteria. So we will definitely be looking to work with them to respond to your questions about your situation. Thanks. But the other, what you're requesting data for SEAC, if you could put that in an email to us, please. Thanks.
Okay, we need a motion to extend to 9:30. Because we're at 9:20 now. Melissa.
Seconded by?
We need a seconder.
I can second that. Yeah.
Thank you, Leo. Anyone opposed? Extend till 9:30. Okay, thank you.
Questions, I guess, Nora and Melissa.
We have Nora, Melissa, and then we really need to move on to the rest of our agenda.
Okay, I'm just going to try and keep it short. I guess my question and confusion is, if we're so worried about privacy, then the identification and the labeling of ISPs after people's labels or IDs kind of is outing people. So if there's a whole class that's called the autism class, and kids are all in the autism class, you've kind of told everybody in that class has autism. So, I think everybody's speaking out of both sides of their mouth when it comes to privacy and identifications. And I think the other really important thing to make a distinction is a diagnosis and an exceptionality are not the same thing. So lots of kids have a diagnosis and don't have an exceptionality, actually, right? And then there would be people who would have an exceptionality and not necessarily a diagnosis, because boards determine their own criteria for identification. The ministry gives you this vague definition, and then boards make the determination. And so I think I bring it up because actually the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, like if we're talking about the Human Rights Code, it's about disability, not special education label. So the identity of disability is a protected ground under the code. And so that's what we're talking about, and that's why we're talking about ableism. That's why we're talking about disability, because that's actually a code, like a ground under the code to be protected. And I don't think that right now we're being successful at that. And we use lots of special education terminology that I think is clouding the issue sometimes. So I just want to clarify that. Thanks.
Thank you, Melissa.
I'll just be brief. Leo was raising a question about gifted, and we will hear from Psych in the new year, which is great. But your question, Leo, has been asked a number of times before. And just to reassure you, while you're waiting for the formal update, I think some of the information we'll receive is that the gifted assessments are seasonal. And so we used to get information monthly. It would sort of show the seasonal increases a little better. Now we're only going to get it every maybe 3 months. So what happens with the gifted assessments is potentially one learning center has a group of schools that have just submitted their CCAT processing, which then leads to the request for gifted assessments. So I think that you're going to find there's answers like that, not that there's anything nefarious in preferring one set of students over another. Another issue is that the gifted assessments typically take an hour or only a couple of hours. The comprehensive assessments take multiple hours, often involve multiple professionals over multiple days or weeks. And so those can stay on the list for longer until they're completed. The gifted ones, they sort of come in and go out. They're a little more straightforward. So I think that you'll find there's a number of explanations like that. I think your implication that there's some kind of factory or mill or preference or creating identifications where they don't exist is not accurate and not appropriate, and I don't think you should be inferring that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So we need to move on, and we can revisit other questions at the end. So the next item on the agenda, there's a couple more items on the agenda yet. For the trustee report, I've asked Leanne to send a link to the Ministry is doing their pre-budget consultation. They have both a survey and you can write letters to the Minister of Finance. The deadline for that is January 31st. The survey, I'm sending out the link to the survey, is actually quite straightforward to fill out. And item number 5, or question number 5, asks you to prioritize a number of things for spending, and education is one of the check boxes. So I'm hoping that members can go fill out the survey, put in their priorities for the government to spend its money. There's a couple places for open suggestions. So you can tell the government how to spend their money next year, hopefully. And please share the link widely for the survey. It's really quick to, get all your friends to fill it out. It's really quick to do. And if you want to be more detailed, please feel free to write the letter to the Minister of Finance. So the next item on our agenda is the roundtable for associations and community updates. So we've already had the K-12 working group. I believe Easter Seals had a request to give a 2-minute update, and then we have updates from our other working groups.
Easter Seals, are you there?
You need your mic.
Easter Seals, are you there for your update?
Lisa might have gone to bed. She has younger kids. She might have had to drop off. Is Elisa still on? Oh no, Julia? Okay. I'm just looking.
I guess hearing no update, we will defer that to the next meeting.
It was also shared, I believe.
Yes, it was.
It was also
Okay.
It was also shared. So working groups, we still need members for a terms of reference working group. So please do email Leanne regarding that. We'd like to get that wrapped up. It would be an ad hoc working group, so it would only be the number of sessions to get the terms of reference finalized. Most of the work was already done previously, but they were never adopted. And so where do we have special education plan working group?
Okay, I'll be fast, and just while Leanne's calling up the special education plan table of contents.
She's going to do it because I'm having.
Oh, okay. Okay, so just while you're doing that, I'll just give a brief other pieces of information. So the special education plan working group met twice this month. We went through a lot of feedback. Thank you for the feedback that was provided. A summary was circulated that includes the feedback that's being presented. This is less than what we received because what we found in some of the feedback received, it was making suggestions that already appear in other parts of the plan, or we incorporate it in other ways. So our work is we take the feedback, we try to see where it can be incorporated in the plan, is it already there, and so on. So that was one of the handouts that you received for material for this meeting. You can take a look at it. If anyone ever has any questions, feel free to contact anybody in the group. Also, we encourage everybody and your communities to provide feedback on any aspect of the plan at any time. There's feedback links throughout the plan that make it easy, or you can tell somebody on SEAC who will send it through to our working group. So what we've done is we've taken a different approach this year. Just to recap, we're dividing the whole massive plan into chunks with subject topics that are related to each other. Last month, we asked for feedback on sections A through E and R and S. If you look at the table of contents, and in particular the hyperlinked version, when you see a topic that's of interest, you can click on it and find more information. The sections that we did last month are sort of overview, very informative, how things are set up, who does what are the big picture issues. So even though that was last month, if you have feedback on that or anything, please provide it at any time. What we're asking for feedback this month, and ideally, well before our January meeting so that we can take the feedback and digest it, is on sections F, G, and H. We lump those together because they're related. So big picture, section F, if you're able to go to the table of contents, Munshi, that would be great. Section F is about assessments. So you'll see assessments by teachers, and it lists various kinds, assessments by professional support services. Again, especially for our newer members, if this is sort of the operating guide on how things are done. You'll find a wealth of information in here. 1
minute timer.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so the next section is basically about identification, early identification, and early years intervention programs. And then section H is basically the IPRC section. So these three sections together are just, I think, under 50 pages, so it's a digestible chunk. There's diagrams in there. It's attempted to be easy to understand. So assessment, identification, IPRCs, they all go together. They really affect every student in one way or another who has special education needs. So we encourage you to take a look at those, and please do provide your feedback, short or long. We appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, we also have a distributed update from Autism Ontario, and I see, Bronwyn, your hand is up. We have 1 minute left.
Got that. Yes, thank you. I just wanted to also sadly agree with Leo. I live in North York, as I mentioned in the chat, and I have many friends in the community. It is like a new trend, unfortunately, because my daughter's in grade 3. grade 4 is when this all happens. It's like a competition in the community. You know, is your kid getting into this? Are you going to be gifted? Like it's really quite sickening. And I never saw this as a parent, you know, until now recently, because we're in this age bracket now where it's happening, and it is very real. And it is happening privately. People are getting private educators to do this behind the scenes. It's happening very much. So if anyone wants to research and look into this, it is sadly happening, Melissa. I'm not sure yourself. I don't know if you have kids or not, but I'm in so many parent groups, and it is saddening. So it's very much a problem. I just wanted to comment on that.
Okay, thank you. So our next meeting is January 15th. And the meeting will start with the election of a chair and vice chair. And so our system superintendent, Nandy Palmer, and associate director, Louise Srisco, will be chairing the meeting until the election takes place. And that's it for our business today. Do we need a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
We need a motion to adjourn.
Sorry, I just want to, on behalf of the Spec Ed and Inclusion Department, just wish everybody happy holidays, and we look forward to seeing you in January. Thank you.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn,
Seconded.
Richard. Seconded, I see nodding by Melissa. So thank you very much, everyone. Sorry for the technical delays this evening. And thank you for all your great feedback. And please have a very safe and relaxing winter break.
Good night.